Mr. Stephen D'Souza is with me from CBC. As I told you earlier that we will be talking to him today. He's already online with me. We are going to discuss the issue of Mr. Donald Trump. What's going on in the US at this time, at this moment. Stephen, welcome to Radio Parvasi. Good morning.
Good morning to you, Rajinder.
Yeah, so it's not even 4 months since Mr. Donald Trump took over as the president of US, and the way he is moving, the way he is going, I don't see that he can continue for some more months. I mean, everybody is now skeptical that will he be able to continue as the president? So what is the situation right now?
Well, in his mind, he sees the opposite. He sees that he's going to continue. He's going to press forward. He gave a speech yesterday at a commencement for Coast Guard cadets, and he sort of signaled that, when your back is against the wall, when everyone's telling you you're wrong, that you keep pressing forward. And that's really been Donald Trump's his way of behaving throughout his life and throughout his career. He never really admits mistakes. He continues to press forward even when critics tell him he's wrong. And so as president, he's shown no signs of changing his behavior from his life as a private citizen. And so I think, as much as the critics around him are saying that Donald Trump can't go on and that this isn't sustainable, in his mind, he's going to keep pressing forward. And you see a little bit of that this morning. Yesterday the White House put out a very reserved statement talking about the hiring of a new special counsel, saying that they welcome this, that ultimately it will be proven that there was no collusion. But this morning on Twitter, you see the president attacking, saying that this is the largest witch hunt in the history of America against a president. And so when it comes to Donald Trump's mind, he's going to keep going forward no matter what.
And while he addressing those cadets, he said that the American media is very, very harsh on him. He said, I'm the most hated person so far in the history of US. So he's admitting all these things. So he knows it. Do you think he's doing deliberately?
Oh, of course. I mean, the attacks on the media are a very deliberate strategy. On the one side, it's a very personal, ego-driven thing by Trump, where he lashes out at anyone who criticizes him, especially in the media, because he loves the media when they're complimentary of him. He calls the New York Times himself. He has them in his office for interviews, the Washington Post and others, because he seeks the attention. But when the attention is negative, he lashes out. But on a more political side, attacking the media makes Donald Trump the victim, and that plays to his base, because in his base's mind, for Trump supporters, they don't see things the way you might read in the New York Times or on CBC. They don't see this as an investigation into Donald Trump. They see this as an attack by the media, by established bureaucrats in the government, attacking Donald Trump. And so by attacking the media, he plays into that narrative, and he plays into the narrative that his supporters believe that Donald Trump is trying to do his best, despite the entrenched factors of the media and the bureaucrats in Washington trying to bring him down.
Okay, so Stephen, people around him have been fired. He himself fired his FBI director in totally unceremonial way. And now there is a former director of FBI, Mr. Robert Mueller, has been appointed to investigate this whole affair of election scandal. So at the same time, he's meeting Russian foreign minister. He's sharing some very, very secret information with him. And now I have heard from our Canadian politicians, even they are scared to share anything with Mr. Donald Trump. You never know this information is going to be kept secret or confidential or not. So the way the investigation has started, where do you think it goes?
That is the biggest question now. Where does it go? And I think it really can go in a lot of directions. Robert Mueller, the former FBI director, who's now been hired as special counsel, he was hired by Rod Rosenstein, who is the Deputy Attorney General, who we will recall when Donald Trump fired James Comey, he said it was initially based on a recommendation by Rod Rosenstein. And, that explanation subsequently fell apart based on what Trump himself later said. And the reports say that Rosenstein was quite upset that he was used as a pawn in this, pretext for firing James Comey. And we're also hearing reports that the hiring of the special counsel really wasn't run through the White House, which is the way it's supposed to work. The Justice Department is supposed to operate separately from the White House, and that the White House was basically given a half an hour notice that this was coming down. And so the statute that the special counsel was hired under gives him wide latitude to cover a wide range of issues and a lot of funding, a lot of resources at his disposal, and really it seems true independence from any interference. I mean, ultimately, he's not protected like a special prosecutor would be, like Ken Starr was during the Whitewater investigation. He still technically could be fired by the Justice Department, even possibly by the president, but that would be a huge step, sort of Nixonian, going back to the 70s. So in this case, he has a lot of latitude to investigate. The challenge there, though, is that if he's looking for criminal activity, he has to prove intent. There's a very high legal threshold there. And so this could take months, could take years. And so for people hoping for a quick resolution to this investigation, they may be left wanting.
Okay, and he has started losing support from his own fellow Republicans now.
That is a tricky thing, yeah. I mean, as the revelations pile up, more and more Republicans aren't speaking publicly in support of Donald Trump, aren't willing to go out and defend him. A very small handful have, mentioned the I word, impeachment, or talked about that as even a possibility. The key for this all comes down to the fact that no Republican Congress has ever impeached a Republican president. Whenever impeachment has been brought up in the past, it's always been the opposite. You've had a Republican Congress, a Democratic president, or a Democrat Congress and a Republican president. So the factor that needs to be addressed is, and that could influence Republicans to ultimately go after the president, is public support. If these Republicans, many of whom who are up for re-election next year in the midterms, if they start to see their own electability become a factor, if they see the tide turning among their own constituents, that will be the deciding factor, I think, for many. And as we see more revelations pile up, that is starting to happen. That groundswell of opposition to Donald Trump in a lot of Republican areas is starting to happen, and it's starting to affect these Republican congressmen and women. And so that's where we're seeing that will be ultimately the tipping point, is if public sentiment gets to a point where Republicans realize that their seats are in jeopardy and that they have to act, and that Donald Trump is no longer a benefit for them, but he's in fact a liability.
Okay, and another very important story which was in the news, and I salute you for that. I read that story, Stephen, about the bankruptcy of Puerto Rico. So you covered this whole story. Will you give us a little bit more information to our listeners for that?
Yeah, this is a story, one of many that's happening in the United States that doesn't get a lot of attention because of all the attention focused on Donald Trump. But
yeah.
Right now in a court in San Juan in Puerto Rico, the largest ever government bankruptcy in U.S. history is playing out before courts. Puerto Rico owes $123 billion, billion with a B. This goes back to economic troubles they've had in the U.S. territory. Since 2006, that's how long they've been in a recession. And so this is a case where for years and years and years, Puerto Rico was protected by U.S. law that said that investors who bought Puerto Rican bonds didn't have to pay tax on the interest. And so a lot of investors poured money into Puerto Rico, always thinking that Puerto Rico, because it's a territory like U.S. states, wasn't allowed to declare bankruptcy. But that changed last year when the U.S. created a new law that created a new type of bankruptcy that Puerto Rico could declare in order to save itself, basically from a fiscal and humanitarian crisis. And so now they're in court going through this process, and people are worried because they don't know if Puerto Ricans are going to have services, if they're going to have public services, if they're going to have any money left, what's going to happen to their economy. Already the country's lost 10% of its population in the last decade. More and more people are leaving because they don't see any economic hope, and they don't see any hope in the future in the country or in the territory. And so it's a long and very complicated process that's about to unfold. And basically bondholders, the public, pensioners, everyone's going to take a hit. And from experts I speak with, they say things are only going to get worse before they get better.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you very much for all your input, all the information you share with our listener time to time, and we give you best wishes for all of your journalist career. You're always a help. Whenever I call you, you're always more than happy to talk to us. So nice of you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, and thank you. Thank you, and to your listeners as well. My pleasure.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you very much.